Hello, everyone, and welcome to a new episode of the Foreign Language Teaching Series, FLTS. We're going to be talking today in Martin, in the state of Tennessee, in the United States of America, with one of my favorite colleagues here at the university, instructor of Japanese, known as Hamondo Sensei, which means teacher or professor of Japanese. And this is Kyoko Hammond. Kyoko, thank you very much for being here.
Thank you so much for having me today. Very excited.
Well, I've been wanting to do this for a long time.
That's true.
I'm glad we finally got some time to sit down and chat a little bit. Because I'm really interested in your experience teaching Japanese here in the United States of America. And but before we talk about that, I would like to go back in time just a little bit, not too much, to kind of talk a little bit about your beginnings as a foreign language learner. So when did you begin learning a foreign language? What foreign language and why?
The first foreign language was English. I remember that. And I went to kindergarten, which is it's different from kindergarten here. It was more like preschool. And that school taught English. And so main thing we learned was how to write alphabets and also just learning some vocab. Like I remember A was apple. I remember that. B, I don't remember anymore.
Bus, maybe.
Yeah, maybe. So, but that was my first encounter. And then in Japan, we all have to learn English. And it was mandatory in junior high school and high school. And then, we all have to take an entrance exam to enter high school. And also, if you want to go to college, junior college, you need to take an exam. And we just cannot skip English. So now I believe English is introduced at the maybe like fourth grade. But my time, we did not have any English in elementary school, and then junior high school, when I was age 13, I started taking English in school.
So in Spain, I don't think I began learning English until sixth grade, but...
It's about the same. Yeah, it's about the same time, I would say. Yeah, because maybe in Spain, maybe a year earlier or something like that. But now, Japan's trying to teach earlier. Than maybe in Spain, like fourth grade.
And I can see that English was the language that was more readily available when you were living in Japan. Are there any other languages that are taught in Japan besides English?
Back then.
Oh, it wasn't that long ago, no.
Not really. But in college, we had to take the second foreign language. And so then we had, German, Spanish, French, Chinese. I think back then Korean was not so common, but now I think I hear that Korean as a second foreign language, option at the college level. But maybe now some high school may offer, English and something else, maybe Asian languages. I see that, but it's usually in college, the Japanese people start learning more than, like English, or I should say like English and another foreign language.
Were you drawn to foreign language right away, or was it challenging for you? What kind of a student of foreign language were you?
I was horrible.
Well, I somehow can't believe that.
I think I mentioned that, so many times, but my first actually, I guess, encounter, into American culture was the drama on TV. That was a Little House on the Prairie. And so that, I guess, family dynamic was so different from mine. My family was a little bit more traditional compared to even my friend's family. And so I was just so fascinated by just watching that show, how much the father was involved in the basically kind of child raising. And also...
So it was a cultural thing too.
Cultural thing, yeah. And also like how, I guess, like directly the Laura can express her feelings, happiness and sadness and everything. And I guess I was taught more like keep it down. Kind of moderate level. So I think that was my first fascination about the US culture. And so I wanted to see if that's just a drama or it's real.
And I suppose those shows were not dubbed into Japanese. They were in English, right? Because in Spain, all those shows were available, but they were dubbed into Spanish.
I think that one was actually dubbed. Yeah, because I was in elementary school age, and so I don't think I was reading. I think I was just listening. So I think it was dubbed. And back then, there are not so many, American drama on TV. But I guess, that was a good show.
Now you're saying that you were horrible, which I don't believe. But what did you find challenging about English as a speaker of Japanese?
Yes, I think because the honestly, I was just studying English for the basically test purpose, to get the good grades or to pass that exam. So for me, it was more like just memorization, of like just many vocabulary words. I already had a little book and then just try to remember, those things, or try to remember conjugations or grammar rules. And so not so much for enjoying conversation. It was just a book and a dictionary. And then that's how I study. And so, but I thought that's what I need to do to enter high school or to enter college. And so finally in college, I was able to take a English conversation class, but I did not participate in the conversation so much. I guess I was a little bit embarrassed, because all the classmates are Japanese. And so like, why do I speak English
when
to
they
them?
can speak Japanese,
it just kind of felt not real. It's just kind of fake. And
isn't that part of the problem of learning a foreign language in a classroom? That everyone shares a mother tongue, and then you're sort of in a fake sort of way speaking another language. Right?
Yes, yeah. So I think it was same, but at the time I was just not seeing that genuine joy of learning. I was just kind of doing it because I had to pass or because I have to get the good grades.
What do you remember anything that you found particularly difficult or challenging about English, like the grammar, the vocabulary?
I think it was vocab, because there is not so much, like resembling between English vocab and Japanese. So I just have to remember from the beginning. And so that was tough. And also spelling, was always difficult. Yeah, so because Japanese, as you know, at least, the basic ones, one sound, one letter, and then, yes, there are those Chinese characters, but I think once you know so many, it's not that hard. But English, it's always, you kind of have to figure out how to spell. Sounds like this, but when you're spelling, it doesn't exactly follow the same rule.
And you're never sure how to pronounce a word unless you've heard it before, because, in Spanish it's a little bit like Japanese. There's only 5 vowel sounds, and, the spelling is fairly consistent, but in English it's very much the opposite. Now, when did this change for you, that you began to appreciate the joy of learning a foreign language?
Actually, when I came to the United States for the first time.
So study abroad.
Study abroad for 4 weeks, and then it was language school and homestay package. And as I said, I wanted to come to the United States sometime, when I was in college. And so my friend and I decided to come right before our senior year, and then found this 4-week program. And we did not know anything about United States. So we went to some kind of school, I don't know, travel, study abroad, kind of counter or office. And we just said we would like to do homestay and maybe language package for 4 weeks during our spring break. So what do you have? And they said, well, we have one in San Diego and the other one in Texas. I don't remember which city. And so she asked us like, any preference? We are like, I don't know, but they were like, do you want to do some sightseeing as well? So we said, yeah, sure. Then she said, okay, then why don't you go to San Diego? So my friend and I were like, okay. So that's everything, I guess, started, from that time.
So how important do you think then that study abroad is for a foreign language student? Not just yourself, but also, the students that you teach here at the university.
Yeah, I want everybody
Mm-hmm.
to have that experience. You know, whether you like it or not, you need to see that culture or the country or try the language in that society or in the culture. And so it's that kind of brings you actually finally make that language real. It's not something you are doing in classroom, kind of like fake conversation, right? So you actually try in a real situation. So yes, there is a kind of financial burden, and you know, sometimes maybe health doesn't allow, you know, certain people to go, but if you can, you know, I really encourage anybody, you know, actually try that.
How do you remember the first experience as a foreign language student studying abroad here in the United States, in California, in San Diego? What memories do you have of that?
It was my first thing was our host mother stopped by the McDonald's on the way home.
So it was pretty stereotypical, right?
So she said that, yeah, why don't you try? And I'm like, sure. And of course we have McDonald's in Japan. So I thought, oh, no problem. I can handle this. And then so, you know, on the menu, I was saying, okay, I'll like this one, please, or like this, you know, just kind of like the simple thing. And then the cashier person asked me, here or to go. And that, like, that here I understood, but to go, I like that here or to go. It was a very fast, and I did not understand what that person was asking me. And I'm sure I asked like, excuse me, like one more time, please, like pardon me. And then finally that person gave up on me. She was like, here you go. And then I'm like, okay, thank you. But it was just that kind of just not just I was just not able to understand what they were saying, you know, period. And then my friend was a little bit better. So she understood, but I was just kind of like zero, kind of bottom. But then, but I had the knowledge of English. It was not kind of conversational thing, but I knew certain vocab. I knew that grammar. So if I had time, I was able to kind of make up a sentence and then say that sentence. And so during those 4 weeks, I think after 2 weeks, I was able to understand some of the classmates, you know, what they were saying. And I was still not fast enough to respond like in, you know, in a timely manner. But then almost like towards the end of like maybe 3rd week, beginning of the 4th week, I felt like finally I can do some kind of conversation. But since I was just so bad at the beginning, I was able to see my improvement so much. And that was fun, you know, and I'm like, this is it.
And I guess being able to use the language in context and actually communicating, because I often tell my students of Spanish, you know, that this is a skill that you acquire, that you can actually apply in the real world and communicate with people. And I always tell them, you know, if you go to a Mexican restaurant, for example, try to order your food in Spanish using what you know and see if you get what you ordered, you know, that kind of thing. So
exactly. So that was just so much fun. But at the same time, I remember that kind of towards the end of the 4 weeks, my friend and I went to LA, and my dad had a friend there, actually kind of his friends, so kind of older.
From Japan?
From Japan, working, you know, for the same company, but in the LA office. And so he picked us up and took us for a dinner. And so, of course, my friend and I were just so kind of all psyched and excited. So, like, I was like, I want to come back and then learn more about this. And then I remember Mr. Aoyagi kind of like laughed at us. He was kind of like, yeah, everybody says that, you know, and then that kind of made me almost mad. So I'm like, okay, you know, watch me. I'll do that. So in a way, maybe his kind of comment made me even more serious about learning. I just didn't want to do it just kind of for fun anymore. So since then, I remember my sister was just kind of like, amazed because I was just always holding a dictionary and then kind of reading a dictionary. And then my sister was like, "What are you doing?" So I'm like, "I'm just learning a new vocab. This is wonderful." And she remembered how I was when I was in, school before. So she was just like, "What? Is it really fun?" I'm like, "Yes."
So there was
fun.
a change after.
It was almost 180 change for me.
Now you are, I must say, and I really mean this, one of the more successful foreign language teachers here in our department because you have this passion for teaching. I think you connect with the students so well, and I'm always impressed by that. How many good students you have and everything. And when did you decide that you wanted to teach? Is this something that was on your mind early on? Because for me it was, since my father was, and he's now retired, but he was a high school teacher for decades. That's something I always knew I wanted to do. But
I see.
Can you tell us a little bit about how this happened in your case?
That was, again, so I convinced my parents, actually my dad, so I came back to San Diego. And I think one thing I was fascinated was that the basic pedagogy. I was wondering why Japanese schools don't teach English in this way, a little bit more kind of conversational way, and then actually it was Chuck. We already met by that time, and he asked me, "Oh, I would like to learn Japanese. Teach me some." And I'm like, "I can do this." And then but it was so hard, to teach my own native language. I've never analyzed my own language, so it was very hard, very challenging. But at the same time, I was just so excited about it. How could I make, how can I do to teach this language, in a fun, but at the same time, kind of the real way, not just kind of grammar, writing down or translation way. And so that just everything kind of clicked at the time. So, okay, I will come back to United States as a Japanese teacher, so I can teach the language I love, plus I can keep learning English as well. So again, it was one day. It was kind of not gradually, not I didn't think over it. I was like,
overnight,
this is it. Overnight.
This is what I want to do.
It. Yes.
Now Kyoko has mentioned Chuck, and Chuck is Kyoko's husband, who is from California, and he is the professor of German here at the university in the same department with us. Now, you said that it was difficult to teach your own language. What do you mean exactly by that? And what did you learn about your own language by teaching Japanese?
I think the one, probably you remember, in Japanese we have two kinds of adjectives. One called e adjective, and the other one is na adjective. And so if it's e adjective, just like English,
like kawaii.
Kawaii. So kawaii, inu, that's fine. But if you're using na adjective, like kirei, and then you have to say na hito, person, or something like that. And then so Chuck asked me why? And I was like, I don't know. There are just two kinds. One it's just e, and then the other one you have to add na, and then that. But at that time I did not know even there are two kinds of adjective. When I was just randomly teaching some adjectives, and then I realized, wait a sec, this one I can just say pretty dog, but beautiful, I need to insert this one more letter to connect. And so that kind of thing. And so through teaching Japanese, I learned the system of Japanese language, and also the what is actually different, comparing to English, for example, and what is kind of similar. And so that's always kind of fascinates me. And since I'm a native speaker of Japanese, sometimes I do not understand why students are having trouble with certain phrases or grammar, or even word. And so, but when students make that kind of comment and then point me because this is the reason, it's just so confusing. And that's also like very excites me. I'm like, I never thought about that. Like when I say minasan, I mean like, hi everybody. But then one student said like, who is Mina? Like, who is Miss Mina? So I'm like, never thought about that. So it's always some kind of new discovery about my language, through teaching Japanese. So that's a lot of fun for me.
When you're trying to teach Japanese to American students, for example, does your experience as a learner of English help you in any way?
I just try to share that my experience. So for example, like the even pronunciation, usually English speakers have hard time to pronounce darirurero. And so, we try and they cannot do it, or they cannot say, certain phrase, yoroshiku onegai shimasu. Their mouth is not, not used to that movement. And so when they're having trouble, they feel kind of frustrated. And then some students sometimes try to kind of like, I don't want to do it. Then I say, well, I understand, because when I was learning English, I had a very similar, experience. You're having the problem with this. For Japanese people, it's between R and L. It's very hard. And then I give, for example, my explanation, experience. And then students feel like, oh, so that's the thing about foreign languages. Of course, you have a hard time learning new stuff. The Japanese people also have a really hard time learning English. But now you can understand, for example, when you see our exchange students from Japan, they try to talk to you, but maybe they're a little bit shy. Can you understand why they feel that way? And then like, just like you had a hard time to just kind of say just a little word in Japanese, then they feel that kind of empathy. So I kind of try to make the connection, between their experience and my experience, and then maybe the other international students' experience. And then they feel actually okay not to be able to do things perfectly, from day one, right? Yeah. So
well, that difficulty with the R, happens in Spanish as well, because sometimes it's rolled and sometimes it isn't,
right.
and that kind of thing. So I completely understand. Plus, I have taken a semester and a half of classes with you years ago, so I know, or I have experienced as a student how you teach. And when it comes to teaching Spanish, there's this push by many people towards trying to use 100% or 95% Spanish in the classroom, trying to keep English away. What is that like in the case of Japanese? How helpful is English, or the usage of English in the classroom to teach Japanese?
I have to admit, I use English. Probably you remember that, because it's just so different. So students cannot exactly guess what's going on, but actually, through the COVID, I had to teach online. I think we all had to teach online. And so I start using the PowerPoint a little bit more, means adding more images. And, so maybe compared to like 5 years ago, I use English less now, because I have those visual cues. So instead of like explaining what they are, I can just point. And then I also try to speak the kind of models a lot in Japanese, and then just kind of guide them to kind of just try it. And then, so they can just start saying that phrases, not exactly thinking about, oh, we are using grammar this, grammar that. They just start kind of trying, and then I let the student sometimes analyze, why you made the change here. Then of course they are speaking in English, and so English is always helpful to give some kind of guidance, or when students get really confused about certain things, I have to use English to clarify, okay, because this is just grammar, or oh, this means basically that in English. So I use it for the like instructional way, but I try to minimize to explain grammar in class now. So I try to do that kind of flip classroom. So students are supposed to read or
do you think
watch.
do you think like the obvious explaining of grammar
Yeah.
sort of gets in the way of the flow of the class?
Yeah, or sometimes, I think I explain the grammar well, but each kind of individual students have their own way to understand. So some students can understand like that, but other students just take time. They just have to kind of take it in, read it one more time, and then try it. And then, so even I explain in class, it doesn't mean everybody can understand the grammar right there. And so that's why I start kind of encouraging students to at least get read and then try the quick grammar check quiz. So they have kind of some idea what's coming in the class. And then in class, we tried. And then if I see that problem, then I can kind of give the additional explanation, but not exactly zero. So that's the hope. And I always tell the students that's the reason I'm using flipped classroom. So you have your own time to understand this new concept, and you can also bring the question to the class. What was so confusing about watching the video or reading the textbook? Then I can answer you. So it's always rolling, but so you can have your time to understand that. You don't have to be rushed in class, so I just gonna give the clear reason why we are doing this way now.
Now you've been teaching Japanese here in Tennessee for many years now, and in many ways you revitalized and you revived a Japanese minor here that had been lying dormant for a long time before you came along. And when you're teaching Japanese in a rural area of Tennessee, but you still have students that seem to me to be, at least a lot of them, highly motivated. What do you think, or which ones do you think are the motivations that your students have that make them want to learn Japanese when they first come into the classroom? Why do you think students in this area, particularly, are attracted to learning Japanese as opposed to French, German, Spanish?
Oftentimes, of course, the students say anime. They grown up with anime, and so they just would like to enjoy those Japanese pop culture without subtitles, or just for their own interest. That's one I hear. The other reason I hear often nowadays is because it's different. Because they did not have a chance to learn like Asian languages
in high school or before.
And so, but they think they kind of know the European languages, because it was taught in high school level. But, Japanese is different. So they were just kind of like curious what it is, So I hear that reasons a
So
lot.
popular culture,
manga,
maybe.
And it's just simply the curiosity because they never had that exposure to that culture or language.
And how much of that, cultural or popular cultural content do you include or implement into your classes or into your courses?
Since I now offer the Japanese culture class, I always I just give a little bit of just a little bit, and then say, if you'd like to know more, please take that Japanese culture class so we can talk more in depth. But in a language class, I teach more about the culture associated with or related to the language use. So gesture or, certain phrase, like Japanese people don't say no. So often they just say chotto,
Which doesn't mean no.
It doesn't mean no, but it means no, but you need to know it. It means no, that kind of thing. Or, so I was just going to try to give them those, like, when you speak Japanese, you need to know those kind of culture as well. So that's what I cover a lot in the language class.
Mhm.
And then if there is certain kind of events going on in Japan, like, those like ceremonial thing, I'll mention it, show some like quick news clip or something like that, and then ask them like, guess what's going on now?
Now that's a lot easier now with the internet to have
Exactly,
access to that
exactly.
kind of
Yeah,
material.
yeah.
And you have
So,
quite a few students that actually study abroad in Japan
mm-hmm,
because there is an agreement with a university in
mm-hmm,
Japan that
mm-hmm,
students take advantage of.
mm-hmm.
In general, why do you think students are attracted to actually studying abroad and
Mm-hmm.
living
Mm-hmm.
in Japan? What is the draw?
Ah, again, I think it's just so
Hmm.
different, from United States.
Just the
And
chance to be in a place that's
just being,
different.
yeah. And then, just like you said, nowadays they watch a lot of like videos on YouTube and, things like that. So they, just like I wanted to see United States, just watching the Little House on the Prairie.
Well, growing up in Spain, I can tell you that in the 80s and the 90s,
Mm-hmm.
especially in the early 90s,
Mm-hmm.
um, Japanese anime
Mm-hmm.
dubbed into Spanish or
Mm-hmm.
Galician, the
Mm-hmm.
language in the northwest of Spain
Mm-hmm.
where I used to live, was extremely popular, and
Mm-hmm.
it still is. So
Mm-hmm.
I can see that connection there because
Yeah.
even at that point, and I'm talking about decades ago,
Mm-hmm.
that was cultural content
Right.
that was
Right.
very popular and still is in Spain.
Yeah, so I think it's just, and also students are aware that, or they, maybe it's not exactly a true, but they feel that, living in Japan
Mm.
is more challenging than living in, let's say, Spain.
But you don't think it is true.
Yeah, maybe it's not true, but
Hmm.
that's the kind of image they have. When I'm talking to, for example, students, who signed up for travel study, and I'm helping, the German travel study this summer. So I see those students, and of course they are, excited, nervous, everything. But compared to them, to the ones who signed up for Japanese travel study, the Japanese travel students are much more like, I do not want to offend
Hmm.
Japanese people by
Hmm.
saying something wrong,
Hmm.
or what is the mannerism? I don't want to make a mistake.
Hmm.
They assume that it's going to be a huge difference
Hmm.
between U.S. culture and Japanese culture, and so they are, especially because they are living in this rural area. When I was teaching in Southern California, the most students are Asian background.
Hmm.
So it was completely different story. Like sometimes I come on Monday, what did you do, Anton, last weekend? And then, sometimes students, oh, I went to a concert in Japan. I'm like,
Oh wow!
what? And then they really did.
They actually
Sometimes
traveled to
travel
Japan
to
and.
Japan
Hmm.
and then just come back because
Hmm.
LAX was so close. So, and then they were from like Taiwan, Korea, Philippines. So going to Japan is nothing special. Because they have to stop by to go back to Taiwan or
Hmm.
Hong Kong. So they just bought the ticket and then just go and then come back. And that was not everybody, but in a way it was nothing special about it.
Hmm.
But here in Martin, Tennessee, not so many students have that kind of exposure,
Hmm.
and so I think many of them are a little bit afraid of going to Japan alone.
Hmm.
And so that's why I started travel study, so we can go as a group and I can be with them so they feel
And
comfortable
that's shorter
going.
than a
Short
study
one,
abroad
right.
stay. Hmm.
And then so once you go and then taste the water, they feel like, okay, I can be here a little longer. So sign up for the study abroad.
Hmm.
Because again, they may think, oh, I want to live in Japan, or maybe I want to get the job in Japan. But, they were not quite sure if they can actually do that.
Hmm.
Not like, I mean, like culturally, they can adapt that new lifestyle.
Hmm.
So, but, being a student, they can go to our partner university. So they still have that kind of supporting system. And then they can, live and learn and experience and kind of actually learn about themselves. So
Hmm.
this is something, they actually want to do, or it was nice, but actually US life is more suitable, for me.
Hmm.
And so I think that's what it is. But yeah, the COVID time was rough for my students
Hmm.
because many of them whether they can go or not, it was nice to have that idea of maybe I can go to Japan, but
So you think that many of them start learning Japanese with the intention of actually traveling to Japan?
I think over the time they start thinking about going to Japan and then actually experience the culture and eat the food and maybe meet those exchange students they met here and became friends so they want to continue of their journey with Japanese.
What about the Japanese students that actually come here to Northwest Tennessee? What do you think? What have you seen that their experiences are? Because obviously, also in Europe, people have in general an idea of what the United States are supposed to be like. But then, of course, Tennessee is not the same as New York City or Chicago or even San Diego.
Yeah, exactly. So I think it's not easy for exchange students from Japan to live in Martin. They always say people are nice here, and then they appreciate the safety, of this town. But it is hard for them to make friends because there is always language barrier, and also, the Asian students look different, and so some American students are not exactly. They were also like they don't have so much experience with foreign students, so they are kind of reserved to approach them, and then Japanese people also kind of reserved too. So they take time to actually have courage and then start talking to somebody and then make that kind of friendship. But so it's kind of up and down. So I heard that first a month or so is a very, very tough, and then they start getting used to the class and start having some friends, and then again getting a little bit bored because it's really, if you don't have a car, you basically stuck in this town, so they want to do a little bit more, but it's hard to find a ride to go to Nashville to catch a flight, so it's a lot of challenges. And they were just so used to using public transportation in Japan and being independent, so they feel bad to ask for a favor. And
well, that's every time somebody asks me what is the biggest difference between Europe or Spain and the United States, I always say that it's not necessarily the food or the people or even the lifestyle. I usually say there's a whole lot more walking going on in Spain, in cities, and even in more rural areas. And then also the public transportation is just so much better in Europe because it does exist, whereas here, in some parts of the country, many parts of the country, it's not true. Do you talk to any of these Japanese students that come to Tennessee, and you give them tips about what to expect?
Yeah, so actually this school year, I'm taking them to Walmart every Saturday. So we have a little shopping, let's go to Walmart, but it's a little ride, but I can ask them, so how's it going? Anything you are having trouble? So I found it's actually really good for me and good for them. At least once a week we can kind of catch up what's going on. And also, like, it depends on the students, but if they were interested in, I always welcome them to come to my Japanese class so they can meet the students, who are learning Japanese. And then that's the kind of almost easy way to make a connection with American students, through Japanese language interest or interest in Japanese culture. So one student came to my class as a volunteer assistant last semester. So this semester I was able to hire her as a tutor. And so I think it's working really well for both, for her and also for my students. And I also kind of try to tell them that, just think about it. Yes, New York is more fun. San Diego is maybe more fun, but those places you can visit anytime. but but like place like Martin,
Yeah.
you will never actually choose to visit, so you will never see this type of United States.
I think it's a good philosophy because the first
Mm-hmm.
time I came to the United States,
Mm-hmm.
I spent a year in Vermilion, South Dakota,
That's right.
even smaller town
Mm-hmm.
than
Mm-hmm.
Martin. So, and that's the way I looked at it.
Right.
It's not, it was a completely different
Mm-hmm.
landscape
Mm-hmm.
of the United States
Mm-hmm.
or reality in the United
Right.
States than I had expected or than I knew
Mm-hmm.
that existed
Yeah.
because, what the U.S. sells
Mm-hmm.
about itself
Mm-hmm.
through movies and
Mm-hmm.
TV shows
Mm-hmm.
and just basically popular culture
Right.
is a very specific kind
Yes.
of, but
Yes.
it's not even the majority of what the
Mm-hmm.
United States really
Mm-hmm.
are
Mm-hmm.
like. So I took it that way. This is a
Mm-hmm.
chance to be in a place that I probably wouldn't have chosen to be in
Exactly.
if not for this
Exactly. Yes.
exchange
Yeah.
program.
So I'm gonna try to value that,
Mm.
with the exchange students from Japan, and then always kind of towards the end they start saying like, "I don't want to go back. It's so nice here." So, and because we don't have so much, I guess, stuff here,
Mhm,
so the key is people,
mhm,
right? So it's same thing for me, like living in Martin, the key is to have good friends.
mhm.
That's how we enjoy
Mm.
life in Martin.
Yeah.
There is no museum, or not so much, so you're just going to hang out with your
Mhm,
friends. And so I think same thing for the exchange students.
mhm,
So eventually they make good friends, and then because they have to do everything together,
mhm,
um, they cherish that kind of friendship,
mhm.
and then the time together, and so they make their study abroad experience very special and meaningful,
Mhm.
as a whole, but they're all up and down.
Yeah, I understand. Now, going
Ups
back
and
to
downs.
your American students,
Hmm.
they are, as I said before, they're really motivated students,
Mm-hmm.
and I think that's important when it comes to learning a
Mm-hmm.
foreign language. But what do you think the
Mm-hmm.
main challenges that American students face as they learn Japanese are? What if I were to ask you, for a student that has never taken
Mm-hmm.
Japanese, and this is an American
Mm-hmm.
student, an English speaker,
Mm-hmm.
what are the challenges that he or she might face right away?
Writing system, the
Yes,
Chinese characters, for sure.
but we don't. But you don't start with the Chinese characters,
No,
so.
no, yeah. So, but once they hit that advanced level,
Mm,
then I'll start using all the authentic materials,
mhm,
and so they have to deal with that. They may not be able to write or read so
mhm,
easily, but they have to know how to use their dictionary. And then and at the upper level, I said you can bring a computer, and then you can use cell phone for that learning purpose.
mhm,
And then because you need to know how to use those tools. And so, but like nowadays, I think this year I'm start feeling a little bit of dilemma.
mhm.
I think you are also aware of all these improvement of technology.
Artificial intelligence and
Mm-hmm,
all of that, right?
mm-hmm. And so I see the students who understand the meaning of learning language,
Mhm,
and then be able to speak that language and then communicate, and then
mhm,
they can find the joy in
mhm,
it. But I also see that students, or not maybe not going to be a students, but just in general, some people do not see the benefit of it.
mhm,
Why we have this tool? Why don't we use this?
mhm,
It's just easier, and then it's faster, and then we can communicate. And then why do we have to spend so much time and then try to memorize the vocab and try to memorize all these Chinese characters? And then why do we have to do that? So it's that becomes, I think, a big question, for us, not just for the educators, but
mhm,
also for the students or people who would like to learn the language. If they have kind of like my experience who actually enjoy that kind of moment of like, oh yes, this is what I was missing when I was learning English. I really enjoy talking to people, so now I can talk to not just Japanese people who can speak Japanese, but I can talk to more people who understands English as well. And I enjoy meeting new people, so I enjoy that. Just that experience itself is very important to me. But I do not expect everybody's like me. And then what?
Yeah.
And also now going back to, like, sometimes I think I have a dilemma with the system. For example, financial aid.
Yes.
Nowadays, they only cover the courses related to their degree, right? The major program, or for the graduation degree. Then, before I was able to, like, I shouldn't say students were able to continue learning the language, even though they did not know exactly how they would like to use the knowledge later on, but they just simply enjoyed. They didn't know exactly what is so fun about it, but they enjoy, so they just kept taking the language, and then even did a study abroad. But now, if the students, let's say, cannot declare a minor, then once they hit the certain level, financial aid office says you cannot take any more Japanese class because you don't need them for your graduation. It's just so sad,
Yeah.
but at the same time, that's the system. And I don't know what I can do, for that. And so I start seeing that kind of effect on students. They wanted to, but because of the financial burden, they can't.
Or if they start learning it a little too late in their college career,
Right.
and then they can't be minors
Exactly.
or study abroad
Yeah.
or something
Or
like
even
that.
like study abroad. I was able to say, oh, just go. If you can go for a year, that's even better. But now, because of the financial aid, we have to be very careful, whether the financial aid actually will cover your study abroad time in Japan, or they start saying, oh, these students do not need this many Japanese credits. Then why, staying in Japan for this long? It's just gonna missing the just the core I don't know value of education, or to me it's the meaning of college. Just explore something new and then just find out what you enjoy or what you actually good at, and then oftentimes what you are not so good at.
Well, since you mentioned the system, do you think the emphasis that in the United States and I think also in Europe, pretty much all over the world, the emphasis that is put on STEM in the sciences, do you think that has affected in any way the learning of foreign languages, or is that a reason to maybe want to learn more a foreign
Yeah.
language?
Um, it's a very, good question. So just like, some students or some people, let's say, find the value in like humanities. So it's not, maybe you cannot calculate exactly, why why we are learning this, because it's not something, okay, because you learn this and that, then you can earn this much money later on. There is not so much that kind of, the clear path, but, STEM in a way, I don't know if it's true or not, but people can kind of assume if I learn this major, then I can become this, which means it guaranteed this type of income, afterwards. And so that's something like I start talking to some colleagues and also people in a business, field. What I believe it is important for my students to learn, but if that kind of society or like kind of the business, I should not say business, but the life after college, students have to deal with, if that they are not exactly value what I'm believing is valuable, then here is a huge gap, between what I'm doing here and then what the others are expecting, afterwards. And so it's just not that. I think that's the challenging thing for the foreign language, and also like maybe humanities as well. So to kind of convince or like just give that the little bit more. I don't know. To be honest, that's something that I've been thinking this.
To be able, in a way, to be able to sell, right?
Yeah,
For lack of a better word, to
yeah,
be able to
but
sell the
yeah,
importance of learning a
importance
foreign
of
language.
learning.
Well, and as we are winding down the
Mm-hmm.
conversation, I did have a question specifically about
Mm-hmm.
that, which is, why do you think that, or for what reasons do you
Mm-hmm.
think that learning Japanese in the United States,
Mm-hmm.
not in Tennessee, but just
Mm-hmm.
in the United
Mm-hmm.
States in general, in the 21st century,
Mm-hmm.
why do you think learning Japanese in the U.S. is an important, worthy pursuit?
I think that's what I'm thinking now. Before I would just simply say it's just enrich your life.
Mhm.
Just something you never actually maybe imagine
Mm.
or explore, but now you have that experience.
Mhm.
So maybe before this is your immediate society community, and then you can add, and then even now you can add Japan,
Mhm.
almost the other side of the world.
Mhm.
And so that's, and then it's similar but different
Mhm.
from US culture and then United States. So that's just a great addition. And so it's it's like, and then I always said it's not just Japan. Go see the beyond your immediate like community. Just
Mhm.
go find out. Go to Europe. Go to the Africa. Go to just Middle Eastern country.
Mhm.
Whenever you go out and see, what's going on out there.
Mhm.
And then it's so it was not, Japan was not just part of that whole experience.
Mhm.
And so Japan, like, that's what I do, so that's what I can offer. But it can be Spanish,
Mhm.
with Germany, German or French or Korean or Chinese or New Zealand,
Mhm.
or and just fill your life with all these excitements
Mhm.
and unknowns. And so this is a little bit, I'm talking about maybe just a little bit too idealistic, but you know make friends in the world.
Mhm.
And
And
for
language
example,
could be a tool for that.
yes, because like just like like US and Japan were enemies during the World War II. It's
Mhm.
amazing how well
Less
we are
than a century later,
yeah.
yeah.
So but now if something happened between US and Japan, my heart would be torn because I know so many people in Japan and so many people in the United
Mhm.
States. I don't know what to do, but I really feel like just don't do that. Why
Mhm.
don't hurt each other? But now I know some people in not just in the United States, but here.
Mhm.
If everybody can have that kind of like connection
Mhm.
to the people in this world, maybe, maybe, we can be, we can feel more empathy to each other, and then we can seek for a peace
Mhm.
together instead of just because it's unknown, it's
Mhm.
different.
Mhm.
So I don't like it
Mhm.
and I don't want to do anything about it. And then they'll do something to us. So let's just block, instead of having that kind of mentality.
Mhm.
If we have our friends, then we feel like, wait a sec, I know such and such from that community. I
Mhm.
know such and such from the country. You know, let's listen to them. Let's have a conversation and find out what's not working here.
Mhm.
So I don't know. So
No,
world peace.
but language could be the a key,
Yeah.
a gateway
Yeah.
to begin to know the unknown, so to
Yes,
speak,
exactly.
and
Yeah.
to start to try and understand
Yeah,
it.
and also like at the end, we are all human beings. We have a little bit of difference, in a culture and background and
Mm.
maybe belief, stuff like that. But you know, we are human beings.
That's for sure. Last question, Kyoko.
Sure.
What do you see the future of the teaching of Japanese in the U.S. as? What do you think? How important do you think the teaching of Japanese is going to become in the next several years? You know, with more with more ease in travel, and maybe with more immigration from Asian countries, maybe the learning of Asian languages like Korean, Chinese, Japanese will become more important. What do you think in the case of Japanese? What do you think is going to be important in the next, say, 10, 20 years, 30 years?
You mean the teaching in Japanese,
Yeah,
or the Japan in the
for learning
world?
Japanese in the U.S.
In the U.S.?
How important do you think that's going to be? It's not an easy question, but it's the last
It's
question.
I think that's something I am asking to myself recently, and because it's in the 80s, it was more like economic reason, because Japan's economic power was so strong, and then it kind of came down, and then the pop culture came up, and so it's more like individual person's own interest, so they want to learn the Japanese language to understand Japanese songs, Japanese anime, manga, things like that. And so really it's now what, type of time. And Japan itself is having a lot of challenges. And so, I think Japan can learn a lot from United States as well. And so I hope that those kind of like exchange of people will continue. I hope they'll continue between US and Japan. And I think I guess, personal goal would be make more how do you call it, Japanese fans, in United States, and so understand that, I'm just saying Japan, but like Asian challenges, or things like that, and then so they can actually become, it's kind of like mundane phrase, but the bridge between the two country or multiple, like countries or culture. And so to me, I think I will keep teaching Japanese language, but I need to teach more than that. And then it's probably I need to incorporate more culture aspects. And then so they not just understand the language, which can be a tool, but things come with it, which is the culture, society, people, and that actually makes a better maybe relationship between US and Japan, and maybe US and Asian countries.
Well, I agree, because culture and language do go hand in hand, and one is a gateway to the other. Kyoko Hammond, thank you so much for spending this hour chatting with us here. Arigatou gozaimasu. On the foreign language teaching series. It's been a pleasure, and I appreciate your time sitting down here talking to us.
You really caught me the time I'm really feeling that those like dilemma and challenges. So when I come to some kind of like, Anton, I have a solution. then
we'll meet again.
Yeah, meet
and
again.
We'll sit again and talk.
Yes.
Kyoko Hammond, Instructor of Japanese here at the university. Thank you so much. Arigatou gozaimasu. And if anybody out there listening and watching this foreign language teaching series has any questions, any comments, just leave them underneath the video, and we'll be happy to read them and answer them, and start a conversation, which is always the interest here in this series of podcasts. Thank you, Kyoko.
Arigatou gozaimasu.
And to everybody out there, thanks for listening, thanks for watching, and we'll be back again with you real soon on my YouTube channel, Anton GF, on the foreign language teaching series. Signing off now. Thank you, and so long, everybody.
Arigatou gozaimasu.